Uh, the title of the lesson today is going to be called Spiritual Distancing. And of course, as we watch this, of course, you might be familiar with that phrase distancing. We've heard it a lot. And of course, the Bible tells us there are things we should. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can get that off the side. All right. There are things which we should distance ourselves, but also tells us things where we need to be in close proximity. And knowing the difference will have a bearing on our eternal souls. So let's look at this idea of spiritual distancing. And so this past year has brought many challenges. There's no doubt about that. And it's been rough. It's been scary. It's been something where a lot of people have different concerns. And as time goes along, we find out some of it was well intentioned but misguided, and some of it had other problems associated with it. But it's just been a horrible year that we've just gone through. And one of the phrases we've learned in this time period is social distancing. In other words, and we understand why. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, the idea, supposed purpose, is to keep us safe from a dangerous virus. And you just have to wonder, well, why didn't we practice this before? I mean, the potential for viruses has been there all the time. And so you just wonder why they made such a big deal about it this time. And so, but yet we learn it. So we get to that point where someone's standing too close. We ask them to stand back, and they're not going to come punch us in the nose because we offended them. I mean, and so that's what we've seen. And so our reason is that we're not close enough to transmit or catch the illness. And that's what they say. But I was listening to a fellow on the radio the other day. He says, if you want to see if your mask is effective against the virus, put on your mask, go into a fish market, and if you can still smell fish, your mask is not good enough. I mean, just think about that for a minute. Okay. In 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 18, it says, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? Wherefore, come out from among them, and and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Now, that first sentence, be ye not unequally yoked together. Well, what does that word yoked mean? Well, it's simple. A yoke is a farm implement fitted on the necks of two oxen or mules and binding them together so they can pull a plow or wagon or another device with really a lot more ease. And being yoked puts two animals in close proximity, going the same direction and doing the same work. And they're actually more effective that way. And for this reason, a farmer using a yoke would choose two animals of equal size, strength, and even the same species to do the work. And so, I mean, this has been a principle they've always followed. And even I think there's something in the scriptures where it says you shouldn't yoke up a oxen with a donkey. I mean, it's just not right. And so we learn from a yoke is two of the same kind are needed in order to be effective for that tool. Otherwise, it's just like using a tool in the wrong way. It wouldn't do any good. And so one would be stronger or taller or walk with a different movement, and that's not going to accomplish anything. So, all right, now in 1 Corinthians 5:9, Paul says, I wrote you in my letter not to associate with immoral people. And that's true. We're not supposed to associate with immoral people. But is that possible? No, because chances are most people we come in contact with are these type of people. Now, when we think of immoral people, you want to think, okay, the worst of the worst. But no, anybody who doesn't follow God's ways, God really considers them an immoral person. And so, yeah, sometimes we try and categorize, and well, some people aren't as bad as others. And yeah, we get that idea. We know what we mean with that. But in the eyes of God, you're either with God or against God. There is no middle ground, no neutral territory. And in 1 Corinthians 10:21, he says, you cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. And yes, so that is right. I mean, it's really, you can't be right if you're going to do that. I mean, Jesus said the same thing about a fountain doesn't put out good water and sweet water and bitter water. I mean, it's one or the other, but it's not both. And then, of course, trees, they either produce good fruit or bad fruit. All right, Ephesians 5:7, therefore, do not be partakers with them. And you really need to read all of from Ephesians 5, verses 6 through 12 to really get the idea here. And we'll mention verse 8 in a little bit. But don't be partakers with those who do evil. And Ephesians 5:11 says, and do not participate in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead even expose them. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're to expose them. All right. In Deuteronomy 7, verse 3, furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. And he was speaking of the inhabitants of the land where they were about to go in and inhabit. So you shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons. And the reason is God wanted to keep his people pure because he knew the influence that these pagans would have on his people. And yet the people didn't listen and they started doing that intermarrying and stuff. And then they just turned their back on God. Look what happened to Solomon. Here, Solomon had a great example in his father, a man after God's own heart. And he looked and saw how his father David had been blessed by God in so many different ways. And yet Solomon got busy and married all these women, and he started worshiping the false gods and their idols, and he turned his back on the Lord. And we don't know if he ever decided to come back and start serving the Lord again or not. But that information is not given to us. So there's definitely a warning that God gives to us: be careful who we keep company with. And God has certainly warned us about mixing and associating with those who are not faithful to Him. And yes, He has given us those warnings. And He does warn us that they could influence us away from Him. And yeah, I mean, it's not too hard, really. It's just where people's hearts are. Now, the Apostle Paul gave the Corinthians and us a severe warning about keeping our spiritual distance from sinners. Yeah, we need to do that. See, the Holy Spirit inspired Paul to inform the brethren that their companions may not be the best people for them to be around. And that's something, yeah, we definitely want to think about. And companions could be friends, could be coworkers, it could be a family that we are talking about here. And so we can look in the Proverbs, have some warnings from Solomon that we need to pay attention to. The first one is in Proverbs 4 and verse 15. It says, enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it, pass not by it, turn from it, and get away from it. I mean, that's very simple language. Now, that's very similar to the passage we would read there in Psalm 1 and verse 1. He said, how blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. I mean, the language is very much the same, and we just have to avoid things like this. And these words tell us not to associate with sinners. Now, how can we do that when we're all sinners? Well, let's get to this lesson and we'll see when we do that. But yes, practically everybody we meet, even our brethren, are sinners. But there's a difference between those who continue in sin and those who are seeking to stop the sin in their lives. And that's the difference. See, in the New Testament, we see that if we are around sinners for the purpose of teaching them the gospel, it is right. I mean, we should be doing that. And we have friends and acquaintances and loved ones that we want to see them go to heaven. So, yeah, what are we going to do? We're going to try and teach them about God, teach them about the gospel, and teach them about salvation, teach them what God expects of us and how we need to live our lives in order to get to heaven. And then, so thinking of that, there's another warning that we need to focus upon. All right, Proverbs 22 and verse 24 and 25 says, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. See, the problem with hanging around people who aren't interested in Jesus is the fact that we can learn their ways real easy. And it's not hard to do. And we'll explain why in a little bit. The influence of others is great and can cause us to lose our souls. And we just have to examine it and say, is it worth it? Is it worth my soul just to stay friends with this person here and follow what they're telling me to do? So that is why Paul wrote about your companions in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 33 when he said, evil companions corrupt good morals. Now, the problem is that these people whom God considers wicked are not trying to help you get to heaven. And that's probably the simplest test you can ask yourself concerning who those people who you think are your friends. Do they really care if I go to heaven or not? Are they trying to help me get to heaven? See, you can have some friends that maybe they don't want to serve God, but they won't stand in your way of serving God. And they might even encourage you to do that. I mean, now those would be good friends and friends that have some hope. But if you have friends that don't care about God and they start picking on you, making fun of you because you want to serve God, I mean, are those people really your friends? No, they're not. Then you just have to face that reality. And so these people more than likely will cause you to stumble and turn away from God than you turning them away from their evil ways. And the statistics don't lie here. 97 to 98% of the time, the evil causes the child of God to turn away from God, and only 1 or 2% of the time are the children of God able to turn someone away from their evil ways and lead them to the truth and the obedience to the gospel. Statistics don't lie, and those are very startling statistics. So we have to be very careful. As Paul said, take heed lest you fall. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 12 tells us that. All right. All right. Humans, and here's the reason why this happens. See, humans are social creatures. We tend to adapt to whomever we are around. Have you ever noticed that? You're around, let's say, some pretty bad people. Guess what? You're going to behave like them. If you're around good people, you're going to behave like them. And so, as humans, we tend to adapt to whomever we're around. And if some of the people we're around start talking with foul language and obscenities, guess what? As humans, we're probably just going to join in just to fit in. See, if we try and stay different, then they might make fun of us. And so we crave acceptance. And for the most, the only way to be accepted is to become like them. Now, you think, okay, yeah, I mean, that is a true statement. The only way a lot of people are going to accept you is when you become like them. And they don't like the idea of compromise. No. when someone asks you to compromise, it's always you compromise away from the truth, and we'll think about whether we want to compromise towards the truth or not. And most of the time, they don't want to do that. See, humans do not like being the oddball or strange ones because most others will make fun of them and ridicule them in front of others. And so we know that's true. We've seen it too often. And sometimes we're the ones who they were making fun of. And sadly, our young people have not been warned properly. And many of them turn to the world for approval rather than seek the approval of God. And that's true. I mean, a lot of churches have that problem. The young people, they find more things in the world that captures their attention than the idea of struggling to do right in the sight of God. And so that is a real sad state for these young people to be in. All right, sure, we have acquaintances we like to be around. Someone, maybe our high school classmate, someone's been a friend a long time. And yes, we should be trying to influence them to become Christians. We should be, but do we? I mean, that's the main thing. And if they make it clear they have no interest in becoming a Christian, it's time to evaluate the time you spend trying to convert them. And if it's a lost cause and they're certainly not interested, well, guess what? There are other people out there. The Bible tells us in John 4:21 that there are actually people out there seeking the Lord to worship him in spirit and in truth. And the Lord wants us to guide those people towards the truth. If we spend all of our time working on someone who has no interest in trying to change, then we might deprive someone else of our efforts. And so we might have more success teaching someone else. So, a question for you: is the person you consider a friend actively trying to help you get to heaven? I mean, that's going to be the first and most important key right here in this whole discussion. You spend time with some people. I mean, you spend a lot of time. Maybe you have common activities or things like that. And if they're not trying to help you get to heaven, can you really call them a friend? I mean, Jesus, we know, is a friend. I mean, look what he did for you. God is a friend because look what he did for you. But someone who is not trying to help you get to heaven, can you really call them a friend? Yeah, we can call them an acquaintance if you want. But anyway, if they're not trying to help you get to heaven, they're really not your friend. I mean, they're actually working for the enemy. And or you just have learned or you have just learned their ways in which the Lord is not pleased. So it's one or the other. You're either going to be like them and do things that God is not happy with, or they're going to try and help you get to heaven, and you're going to spend more time studying God's word. So there are people whom we need to keep our distance. Yes, there's people, we call them toxic people. And sadly, sometimes they're in our own families, and sometimes there are what we might consider close friends, but they're just toxic. Everything they say is negative or something like that. And so, yes, we do need to keep our distance from some people, and definitely people who really want to cause us harm. Now, getting back to our text about not being unequally yoked, there are people who we definitely need in our lives. Now, here's the important thing about the lesson: not just don't worry about who not to associate with. We got to figure out who we are supposed to associate with. See, we do not fellowship darkness, Ephesians 5:8. And we are encouraged to fellowship light. Now, that's what Jesus is, the true light, and his followers are children of light. Ephesians 5:8. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. And remember, in the New Testament, whenever you see the word walk, he's talking about your manner of life or your behavior. Behavior as if you are in the light of God. Now, what's that mean? Well, that means we we don't act like people in the world. We definitely show that we are different. We show that we are servants of the Most High God, and we are trying to be as faithful to Jesus as we can. And that's what we have to demonstrate to the world. Sadly, out of fear, though, many who claim to be children of light are keeping their distance from the faithful. And that's true. I mean, yeah, they do that. Now, why do they do that? Well, different reasons, but but mainly it's out of fear. For some, it's out of fear, maybe for health reasons, it's out of fear. Sometimes it's out of fear because of what somebody else might say. Maybe a family member is opposed to you going to church. And so they're going to say, well, you're going down there, you're exposing yourself, and something like that. I mean, so it's out of fear when we should be at church with the saints. People are choosing to stay distant, and that's not a good thing. And they claim it's a safety issue, but there has to be a deeper meaning than that. And I think we all know that there is a deeper meaning there. See, the only people on earth that care about your soul are those in the local church. I mean, the members of the church, we care about your soul. And we try and teach things that help your soul get to heaven. And we try and do things in consideration of helping you get to heaven. And really, everybody in the church is supposed to be this way, that we're concerned about each other and helping each other get to heaven, because that is our job as Christians. That is our job, to help people get to heaven. And so these are the type of people you need to be around and learn from and follow their examples. And really, if you spent more time with faithful Christians in your presence, what would your behavior be like? Would it improve, or would it be, are you living like you're supposed to be living? I mean, just something to think about there. Now, the Bible warns us to stay away from the wicked. In other words, anyone who's not a Christian. I mean, yeah, because that's kind of hard to say, because there's people who aren't Christians, but yet they're still pretty nice people, and they're pleasant to be around, and they really don't force you to do things that are bad according to God, but they're really not doing those things that are right either. And so we have the warning, stay away from the wicked. And we're also told that those we do associate with should be Christians. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We should be associating ourselves with Christians. And if they are not Christians, we should be trying to teach them to become Christians. Yeah. And like I said, it's something we should be doing, but sometimes they put up their hands like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. Well, okay. I mean, sometimes we respect that, but we should let them know we're always trying there and concerned for their soul. And who knows, someday it might sink in and they will start asking and inquiring what they need to do to be saved. See, Paul was right to warn us about our companions and where they are leading us. If you're with Christians who are trying to serve the Lord, they're leading you in the right direction. If you're with people who don't care about serving the Lord, how can you say they're leading you in the right direction? You really can't. So spiritual distancing from evil is required. It's actually commanded by God that we stay away from that evil. But we should not distance from the faithful. I mean, just a very simple thing to understand. Okay. That's our lesson. Good lesson. Hi, Barbara. Still can't hear you, but hi there anyway. Nope, still can't hear you. And you're not on mute. Beverly's on mute. And Sheila's on mute.
And we were both talking, Sheila and I. Oops.
Can you hear? Maureen's on the phone.
Yep, Maureen's on the phone listening in.
Barbara can't hear, but she, I mean, she can hear, but she can't talk.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's a blessing. What do you think? Hi, Grandma.
Only Carrie can say that and get away with it, right?
Yeah, I can say things like that and get away with it.
Can you go let him out?
I see you too.
He said maybe it's a blessing.
How you feeling, Grandma?
Couldn't hear you.
Grandma's waving to everybody.
Yeah, doing that little jig there.
Yeah. Anyway, yep.
It's good to
Then
see
again-
everybody.
It's good to see you too.
Put him out.
You're gonna put Al out?
Yeah, he's putting the dog out.
Oh, I thought you were gonna put him out.
He can go put him out.
See, oh, Higgins is gonna put Al out. Oh, brother. Oh,
Yeah, he's taking the dog out.
he's taking the.
Who knows?
yeah.
Maybe someday the dogs will take over and start doing that.
Yeah, that would be nice, huh? I could see Lucky taking you out.
Yeah, right.
Oh
You know,
dear.
Higgins goes out all the time.
Yeah.
He always wants to go out, and he doesn't go out doing anything. He just sits on the patio and looks around.
Yeah, we know. We have one like that too. He's a nosy body. He has to see everything outside.
That's it.
Yeah. But right now he's sound asleep in his bed.
Oh, he is? So
Yeah.
Higgins.